My name is Clark Crenshaw. I'm a photographer out of Garland, Texas. Most of my income comes from selling my photography at outdoor art shows. I do a lot of the local ones. This spring you'll see me at Deep Ellum, Cottonwood Arts Festival, South Lake's got a show. One out in Frisco I'll do at the end of this month. Also one out in Allen you could see me at. I also travel all around the country at different times, doing a lot of other big shows around the country. If you get a chance, you might come out and see me, see my work. I've also got a website. That's clarkcrenshawphotography.com. Got over 1,200 images on there, so lots of things you can look at. As far as my approach to judging the images, what I do first is just sort of rank them in order of worst to best, then give them a score after that that sort of makes sense as to why I felt that way about them. But anyway, let's get on with it. I'll start with the beginners. The very first shot is Lighthouse in Palo Duro Canyon. That received a score of 9. A couple things about this one. I felt like it had probably been HDR processed. It just has some of the telltale problems that you sometimes get if you really don't have the settings and all quite right. If you look at the edge of the rock formations, you can see kind of a glow around it, just almost like it's outlined, and it's pretty noticeable too. Then just some of the other things about it, just some of the tones sometimes just sort of give it away. Something about them just doesn't look quite natural to me. That was Lighthouse in Palo Duro Canyon, and 9 points. The next one is Sunset Riding. This one was a pretty good idea, which was close to coming off. Oh, this one received a score of 9. If you look at the sky closely, it's kind of like it's pixelated. A lot of times just over-processing and, just making adjustments will cause stuff like that to happen. It's fairly interesting with the horse rider kind of silhouetted with the sun behind her there. There's also a lot of clutter in the background, kind of some trucks and some other things. I'd try and clean up the background a little. What would kind of make this one better? Our next image is White Rose. Received a score of 10 points. Had some pretty good things about this one. The rose was good and sharp. But the image was just kind of dark and dull. I actually brought it up in Photoshop and just made an auto contrast adjustment, and then it perked it up big time. The way the image is now, there's really not any whites. The brightest part of this rose isn't a whole lot brighter than a mid-tone gray. And a black and white like this, it's almost always you want to have some almost pure white and some almost pure black. Most of the time your image is going to pop best if you've got it sort of hitting those two extremes. Our next image, Dandelion Sunrise. Gave it a score of 10. This one had some good points to it, kind of the mix of the cactus and the dandelion and then the bright sun behind it. Probably some of what didn't work for me, just some of the composition. I don't know if you just maybe had too much of the cactus going. If I did something composition, I might even shot it vertical. Just included some of that sharp cactus at the bottom and then maybe had the dandelion kind of going up into the bright area a little more than it did. The next one is Harbor Through Tinted Windows. This is a pretty good idea and came off pretty well. It received a score of 10 points. The light is kind of a cloudy, dreary day. I think maybe a little better light, maybe making the sailboats back there pop a little better may have helped this one. Technically everything's sharp, but it just need a little something different going on. Maybe an isolated sailboat through one of the squares or better lighting out there to perk it all up would have helped it quite a bit. So, next image is Reflection. This received a score of 11. This is a pretty good image. Everything about it technically is done pretty well. Compositionally and the contrast and the color and all are real good in this image. One thing about this type of thing, it's hard to kind of cross the line from being kind of interesting to really being kind of a wow image. I don't know, a lot of times they're really interesting, but sometimes there's just a little something else kind of puts one up to a higher level for one reason or the other. This one didn't quite do that for me, but it was a pretty neat image. The next one is Umbria's Harry Potter. That one received a score of 11. This is a pretty good image. It kind of captured the action. One thing compositionally, you got this thing hanging on the wall behind his head. That bothered me a little bit. I guess the big thing is just the color and contrast of this. The light's a little flat, and your processing of this remained kind of a little flat. I played with this image on Photoshop. Just a little boost in contrast, a little adjustment on the color sure helped it a lot. These days, with everybody shooting camera raw, how you adjust an image is so important compared to what it was in the film days. The next one is titled Who's There? This one received a score of 12. It's kind of a nice shot of a barn owl. Everything's pretty well done on this one. Don't have a whole lot of thoughts on how it would improve. I'm almost wondering if I've shot this same owl if this happened to be out at the Herd Museum. Some birds like this, they can't fly probably because their wings were injured. So maybe he doesn't look quite as good as an actual wild owl would have looked. Still a nice image of the owl. The next one is titled Green Heron. I received a score of 13. It was also my first honorable mention. That was by Lulu Warren. It's a pretty good shot of a green heron. Kind of interesting there with the kind of there hiding in the brush. Then you got clear water kind of below him and all that you can see. Pretty good image. That's Green Heron. Our next image is Kentucky Memories. It received a score of 13 and was the third place image. It was shot by Joyce Mangum. It's a pretty good image. Interesting old photographs that this gentleman is looking at. Technically, most things are pretty good with this. You know, it's sharp and the color's good. Compositionally, I wonder if maybe I would have liked seeing the front of this gentleman. Almost wonder if maybe having all the cards out on the table and he's behind all that. But anyway, pretty good shot. Kentucky Memories. The next image is Dark Horse Finish. Gave it a score of 14 and it received second place. And this is shot by Janet Davenport. This is a pretty good image of the horses out at the racetrack. Obviously shot at night, which means lower light difficulty is getting a fast enough shutter speed still to stop all the action. Even though the horses don't seem to be tack sharp, probably just because they're moving a little bit, but the focus seems pretty sharp on them. The lead horse is sharp, and the other horses are pretty sharp too. That brings me to Calla Lilies in Vase. This received a score of 15 points and first place by Nancy Mack. Not a whole lot of suggestions I could say to improve this one. If I was to nitpick, you didn't really merge the flower with any of the borders, but you did get awfully close in numerous places. Maybe a little room around there wouldn't have hurt. Sometimes when you print an image and put it in a mat, the mat is going to cover up just a slight bit, and you don't have a whole lot of room here. But that's about the only thing I could say would improve. You did a great job of keeping everything in sharp focus. I kind of wonder if you used focus stacking to do that. If you did, you might point that out to the other members of the club. It'd be some useful information. Moving on to the intermediate category. Lots of good images in this category. Starting with our first one, we have Peace at the End of the Day. That received a score of 9. It's a pretty good idea, you know, catching things silhouetted at sunset. This one technically was done pretty well. I mean, the exposure and everything is correct. Composition is not too bad. Did kind of get some of the sticks merging with this guy's head, which didn't really help. Also, it just, I don't know, it's kind of a tree and just kind of a guy standing there. It really needed maybe a little more something going on to give it a little more interest. And that's maybe where it could need the improvement the most. Our next image, Winter Color, receives a score of 9. Actually, this one, it's exposed pretty good. The light's not too bad. You don't have any problems with that part of this image. However, it's just kind of, there's this plant. It's not terribly interesting, and it's just kind of a straight-on shot with it. I think, as the previous image, it just needed a little more interest going on. Or that's always a pretty important thing. Going on to the next image, Mother and Child by Firelight. This is a pretty good image. Composition's pretty good. I gave this one 10 points. The contrast is a little flat on the image. Obviously it was shot under fairly low lighting conditions and felt like maybe, I don't know, I played with this one on Photoshop a tad and just gave it a little more contrast, which kind of perked it up pretty good. Pretty good image otherwise. Next image, Mind the Gap, received a score of 10 points. Shows a train, kind of a blurry version of the train crossing the railroad crossing. The exposure and all is pretty good on this one. Compositionally, I might have liked, the back of the signs on the very left-hand side, maybe, not included them. And also it needs something going on to give it a little more interest than just the train. Next image, This Land Is Your Land. Received a score of 10 points. Pretty good image, kind of the American flag with the mountains behind it. A little more dramatic light might have helped this one. It seems to be just kind of, I don't know if it's early morning or just kind of a cloudy, overcast day. Maybe a little more dramatic lighting somehow would have helped this one quite a bit. Compositionally, I don't know, I might have had the flag on the other side since it's sort of flowing to the left. Next image is the Plano photo wall. Received a score of 11. It's kind of an interesting shot of 3 windows, brick wall around them. Most everything's pretty good on this one. The contrast in tones on this shot are good and sharpness is good. It just needed a little more interest. Might have given it a little higher score. A little lacking in the impact part of this one. The next image is titled Morning Mist. Received a score of 11. It's a pretty neat scene. A little fog rolling on the water in the early morning. A little sunlight dappling in places. I think maybe if it had a spotlight of sunlight hitting the building, maybe that would have knocked it up a few notches. As it is, the building's kind of in the shadows and kind of the top of some of the trees got some sunlight, but that's it. But still a pretty good image. Next one is Veil in the Wind, 12 points. Everything's pretty good on this one. You know, good color and sharpness. Probably one thing that kind of bothered me was the veil kind of covered up the kiss part of this one. Maybe some people may think that's good. I don't know. I kind of wish maybe you could have kind of seen all their faces a little better and it hadn't kind of landed right in the way as it did. The next image, Dallas Arboretum, 12 points. Probably the best part of this one is the purple flower at the top and how it's got just almost black behind it where it really just seems to pop. Some of the things that did hurt it was kind of lower. You got the lily pads and the blooms off to the right that are kind of out of focus and kind of pretty bright too and distracting from the flower itself. Maybe a little different composition or something may have helped this one. You know, and maybe just include just the lotus blossom with the dark background. Next image is Fog on Pleasant Lake. Received a score of 13. It's kind of a neat shot of a couple boats out there and a little bit of morning fog. This is done pretty well. Most of the technical things are pretty good on this one. It's sharp and exposed right and processed pretty well. Compositionally, I might have taken some off the left side. I don't know, it just seems to be a little vacant over there, and I know, of course, the boats are pointing that way, but it still just seems like it needed a little something over there to kind of bring the whole thing together. Maybe some reason to have included that much on the left side. But anyway, pretty good image, though. The next shot, Chasing the Moment, 13 points, and an honorable mention by Ming Yang. Pretty neat image. Nice warm light on the mountains in the background, and then got kind of the photographer out there on the edge of the water photographing. A couple changes in the composition that may have helped it for me was I might have had the photographer on the left side and maybe had the very top of the mountain instead of having it kind of running off the image. Maybe had it peeking up about where the photographer is now. I think a couple little adjustments could have helped it quite a bit. Actually, as it is now, cover up a little more than half of the left side. It becomes kind of a vertical. And almost like that sort of composition a little better. As it is now, all the neat stuff seems to be kind of on the right side of this image. The next image is Take That, You Darn Ball. Received a score of 14 points and a third place. This is by Parvin Styles. Kind of a neat action shot of the polo match. It's got a lot of neat things going on here. Just both horse riders everything's sharp, and the ball kind of on the right side is sharp. Really froze the action good. It's kind of neat the one guy's mallet, how it froze the curve in it. One thing that kind of hurt it was the background, kind of the trees and then kind of some bright spots in the grass mixed in back there too. Probably something that's really hard to control. But anyway, neat shot. The next image, The Leap, that received a score of 14 points, was awarded second. It was shot by Larry Blackwell. This one also has a lot of neat things going for it. Really caught the action of this gymnast and has kind of a zoom effect that you got kind of radiating out from the gymnast. Probably the only thing I'd suggest that might have improved it, the large kind of blue area below it, which I'm assuming is the mat. I might have not included quite as much of that as it shows. For me, that might have helped it a little. You might could even just cropped it a little panoramic, and that would have helped. Next image, Police of the Hell, received a score of 15 and was first place. by Ron Lynn. Lots of really cool things going on here. Looks like fireworks had been going off all around this guy. Under and behind him and off to the side of him and everything. Just really kind of a neat shot. Everything about it's pretty good. Nothing I can say to improve it. Moving on to the advanced group. Our first image, Tree and Rocks, received a score of 9 points. Exposure's okay and everything is sharp that should be. Probably the thing that hurt this is the light. It's just kind of a overcast, cloudy day. Maybe shoot this thing with some good early morning or evening light or neater storm clouds behind it, or do something where you caught the tree's shadow across the land or something. Really not very interesting conditions with it just kind of heavy cloud cover like it is now. Our next image, Semper Fi. This one received a score of 9 points. Exposure and sharpness and all are pretty good on this one. I guess what didn't do it for me was it really lacked interest. It's just kind of a picture of an average looking guy. If this guy was a Marine, maybe have him in his old uniform. Something to add some interest. As it is, he just looks like a pretty average guy. Just really doesn't have a whole lot of impact on this image because of that. Our next image, Street Performer, Underground Taipei. 10 points. A lot of good possibilities here. The sharpness and color and all is pretty good on this one. One thing though, the musician is getting a little bit lost in the background. I noticed on the picture on the very far left looks like the start of a solid red wall. I may have repositioned myself a little bit, so, maybe just an area of red wall was behind the musician and he sort of stood out from all that other mural or whatever that is painted on the wall behind him as it is now. Maybe a little change like that could have helped this one quite a bit. Next image, White Rock Lake, Dallas Skyline, Sunset 3. 11 points. Looks like a pretty nice sunset going that day. Might have added a little bit to the image. You can kind of see a silhouette of the skylight. Usually by then a few lights are coming on. Might have helped this image a little if you could see some of the lights on the skyline. And also just, I don't know, maybe I'm too familiar with this image for it to wow me that much. But anyway, still a pretty good image. Next image is Tulips, Tulips, Tulips. 11 points. Color and all is really good on this one. I almost wonder if you didn't maybe crop it a little too panoramic. I'm wondering if I'd liked it better if it showed all the flowers and all the stems and wasn't quite so panoramic. I think I might have liked it a little bit better. Of course, I wonder maybe there's some stuff that got cropped out that would have hurt the image more than that. But anyway, as it is, I just felt it was a little more panoramic than maybe it needed to be. The next image is Birthday Lily, 11 points. This is a pretty good shot. I think I mentioned focus stacking a little earlier, and this one apparently wasn't. This is kind of what you get with one shot. You almost have to focus on part of this and let a little of it just go out of focus, because one shot just can't hold the depth of field. I might have actually liked this one better if it had been focus stacked, so all those little parts of the flower were just sharp as a tack. It's also this shot, I don't know, you see it done a lot, so it's still done pretty well. Old House, 12 points, so received an honorable mention by Bud Barlow. Kind of a neat idea. Probably what hurt this one for me was I felt a lot of it was just put there. The stars just didn't really look particularly real to me at all. But the feel of the old house, the mist around it, the moon overhead, is getting close to being kind of a neat, interesting image. Another thing on the lights on the inside of the structure, they didn't quite look natural to me. A lot of times you get a little light spilling out, like say on the roof or on the front porch. Where I didn't see any of that kind of thing happening here, so I kind of think that part of this image was maybe added with the computer too. The silhouette in the window's a nice touch. The next image, tour boat on the Yangtze, 12 points, and a third place by Jim Shannon. Exposure and sharpness and everything's pretty good on here. The lighting again, it's just kind of a cloudy, dreary day. You got to work with what it gives you. And also the cruise boat in the background. I'm almost wondering if I wouldn't have just let it go on by and get out of the picture, since I think your picture here is the guy standing on the rocks down there and then the boat's behind it. If you could have moved down a little lower and you just had a little clearer look at the boats, I think that would have helped the composition. Next image, ready for takeoff. 13 points and a second place by Sam Wilson. It's kind of interesting shot of a little hood ornament on an old classic car. Probably one thing that kind of helps this is just, it's kind of got the red, white, and blue going here. The red contrasts well with the blue on the top of the ornament, which I think is probably mostly the sky reflecting, then the white of the automobile that it's on. The composition just kind of worked, just kind of almost makes it look like it's flying away there. Pretty well done for subject matter that is shot a lot and hard to, maybe get one of these where it's not just, too boring. You did a pretty good job with this one. Next image. This one is titled Tangerine Dream. 14 points. First place by Don Champlin. This is a neat idea that you pulled off pretty well. Everything's technically pretty good with this one. Got the bright colors, the feathers, the fingernails, the eye makeup, and even a little touch of orange on the ring. Her eyes are good and sharp. Got kind of a catch light in them from your lighting, which is always good. Probably the only thing that I think could improve this. Everything's pretty good. Just maybe the expression on the model. I don't know, this one, she just looks kind of sad or like she's not feeling good or something. Still a pretty good shot and pretty well done. Now we go on to the Masters. First image is Stonewall, 8 points. Fairly interesting subject matter here. Probably the thing I kind of lost it for me, though, was just the saturation of the colors. It's really kind of over the top. Another thing on this one, I think the neatest part of it is the little flags on the wall. I might have tried to isolate some of that a little better, since that's probably the most interesting thing about this. Other than that, though, the composition isn't all that bad, and it looks like, everything's sharp, as they should be. This one's called Cool and Crisp Maine Winter, 9 points. I don't know, the color's really good on this one. Good and natural looking. Looks like really had a lot of potential here. I don't think you really nailed the composition and figured out what's the neatest thing in here that I really want to focus on and tell a story about. I see way in the background kind of I don't know if that's a pier or a road or what, but it's kind of neat looking, but it's kind of way in the back. You also have kind of a dock coming out from behind this red house. Now, I think you just needed to isolate a more interesting part of this photograph and maybe have it a little more prominent in the composition. Next image, Recoleta Cemetery, 10 points. It's kind of an interesting black and white image. The contrast in all on this one's a little bit flat, and the face of the man is almost lost. Maybe dodge or burn or something to make his face stand out a little bit. Just working on the contrast and all would have helped this one a lot, I think. The Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge in Dallas, Texas, 10 points. If you look on my website, you'll see I've shot this thing from about every spot I can think of. This is a pretty good shot of the bridge, a good time of the day. I'm getting to where on these shots like this I'll bracket maybe 4 or 5 exposures. Usually just blend the best parts of the exposures together by, layers in Photoshop. It's pretty good exposure, but a few areas, the bright areas, are getting pretty blown out and washed out. The underneath part of the bridge where those lights are, the left side of the pole, maybe some of the lights going down the left part of the bridge. But anyway, pretty good shot of the bridge. Next image, Mykonos Dining Patio, 10 points. It's technically pretty well done. The exposure's good. Everything's sharp. Probably what was lacking for me was just something going on with the tables. A bottle of wine, a couple glasses sitting there. Or just something to just kind of add just a little more interest. Still a pretty good picture. Next image, cliff reflections and a rock pool at sunset. 11 points. It's a pretty nice image. It's kind of a difficult thing to shoot the abstract curves and shadows and stuff like this, but you did it pretty well. Probably the hardest thing to do with a shot like this is to really make it go from good to really, really good. I'm not sure if this one quite made it into really, really good, but it's done pretty well. Next image is Delilah, Clayton, Missouri. 11 points. It's a pretty young lady who has been to the tattoo parlor a few times. Exposure's good and sharpness. Possibly something which might have helped it for me is she's just kind of sitting there holding her drink. I don't know if I would have focused in on some of the details of maybe one of the tattoos, or maybe her hand and wrist, showing her purple fingernails and the little skull and crossbone bracelet, and maybe showing the details of some of that. As it is, it's a nice shot of her, but she's just kind of sitting there holding her drink, and maybe doing a little something different with it would have kicked it up a notch. Next image is sunrise at Inspiration Point, 11 points. It's a pretty nice image of probably morning light at Bryce. It's pretty good black and white. One thing that would have helped this is it's just kind of lacking in contrast. It needed a little more white going on in it. Most of the bright areas that are here probably needed to be brightened up and just give this image a little more snap and contrast. Still a pretty good image. Next image, Greek Market, 12 points. Pretty nice image of looking down a row of columns somewhere. Done pretty well. Everything's exposed right and sharp. Do notice some people way down at the end that almost are so small they don't really add anything to this. One thing that might have added a little bit is had some people in it, but had them 5 or 6 or 7 columns down the row, so they were a little more prominent. Might have added a little extra interest to this and kind of kicked it up a notch. Our next image, a red crowned crane's courtship, 12 points. It's a pretty good image of 2 cranes look like they're dancing out there in the snow. Pretty well done. Image seems pretty sharp, maybe slightly sharper wouldn't have hurt it any. Not a whole lot else I could say to improve this one. Just didn't quite have some of the impact as some of the images coming up. Next image is Brenda, 0215, 13 points. It's a really good shot of this pretty lady. The lighting and all is real good. The pose is good. I don't know. I don't claim to be the lighting expert and the portrait photographer expert or any of that, but I know a lot of times I hear comments about having a hair light. It seemed like maybe a hair light might have added a little something to that, but that's probably nitpicking, and that's about all I could say to improve on this one, if there was a thing to say. This next image, captured by the prop, 13 points. A neat shot of this old airplane. I kind of like the way you kind of centered the pilot with kind of a little blur from the prop making a circle around him. Kind of an interesting straight-on shot of this. The light's good and everything's sharp the way it should be on this image. Next image, sipping on the dock of the bay, 14 points, and an honorable mention by Danette Volkmer. This is kind of a neat image. Not something I would have shot. One of the things I liked about it is just kind of a little something different, just a little different idea and shot that you usually don't see. It was done pretty good too. The light's good, color and contrast and sharpness of everything is kind of the way it should be. The next image, the T.A. Molten Barn at Sunrise, 14 points. Received a 3rd place, and this was by Ron Hasty. I had some really cool light that morning. Kind of like the way it was cropped into a panoramic, because you got kind of the barn and the mountains on the left and some nice light on the trees in the middle, and then you got the pink of the sunset or sunrise, which is all kind of in the clouds on the right side. It kind of worked pretty good to crop it that way. I've been to this spot, and including more grass on the bottom probably wouldn't have done a whole lot for it. So good job on this one. Next image, a Cowboy Sunday Night, 15 points, and 2nd place by Lois Lehman. It's a pretty neat still life. I like the brown toning you gave. Actually, since it has kind of a vintage feel to it, the little border you put around it, didn't mind that either. Not a whole lot, I would say, to improve on this one. Good job. And our final image in the Masters group, Vintage Glamour, 15 points, and was our 1st place image. This was by John Lehman. It's a really neat shot of this lady. I kind of liked the hand-tinted feel that it had. I don't know. I think instead of me speculating how you did it too much, maybe explain to the club just what you did to get this effect. It looks very much like kind of an old-time black and white that was hand-colored, which you can do that just using the computer. Yeah, I'd probably do the club a favor to explain to them how this was done. Very fine image, your 1st place image in the Masters. And the last thing for me to do here is award a Best of Show. Going back to the intermediate category, Police of the Hell by Ron Lynn. That is your best of show. Once again on this one, just everything about it's just neat. Just all the stuff flying in the air and the fireworks going off everywhere, and then the pose of the man, kind of the stare behind the mask. Just everything about this one's neat and mysterious, and just so different than anything I've ever shot, and different than a lot of the kind of usual subjects that you do see shot a lot. It'd be hard to duplicate this one too. But anyway, that's your best of show, Police of the Hell by Ron Lynn. Also like to say thank you for allowing me to judge for you. Got a lot of neat images